Under the blood moon's unblinking gaze, a single drop of crimson traced the curve of her porcelain throat, sealing 5 years of shadows in silence. Ilara's boots crunched through the frost-laced underbrush, each step a betrayal etched into the frozen earth of the whispering woods. The wind howled like a forsaken pack, carrying the distant clamor of war drums from the Alpha King's stronghold, a symphony of iron and fury that had once been her cage, now her unraveling. She was no Omega born of moon-kissed blood, but a vampire forged in the shadowed crypts of the eternal veil, her skin pale as winter's first snow, her eyes a storm of sapphire deceit. For 5 years, she had woven herself into the heart of the Silverfang pack, pretending to be the fated mate of King Thorn, the Alpha whose throne was built on bones and broken oaths. Espionage had been her art, her fangs hidden behind smiles, her whispers laced with lies that tasted of honeyed venom. But tonight, the masquerade fractured. The rejection came not in words, but in the cold decree of exile, whispered through the lips of Thorn's beta enforcers as they dragged her from the great hall. "The king has seen through your veil," one growled, his breath fogging the air like a dying fire. "Be gone, pretender, before the moon claims your false heart." They had bound her wrists with silver chains. Ironic. For silver burned her kin no more than lies burned her soul, and cast her beyond the pack's wards, into the no-man's land where traitors withered under the stars. The forest enveloped her like a shroud, pines clawing at the sky with branches heavy from recent snowfalls. Flakes danced in the lunar light, each one a fleeting witness to her solitude. Ilara's breath came in shallow bursts, not from exertion, but from the hollow ache blooming in her chest. 5 years. She had mapped the king's secrets, relayed troop movements to her vampire lords, all while sharing his bed under the guise of destiny's bond. The fated mark she had forged with dark sorcery, a glowing sigil on her wrist, mimicking the Omega's sacred claim, had fooled the pack, but not, it seemed, the man himself. How had he known? The question gnawed at her, sharper than hunger. She stumbled into a clearing, the ground carpeted in untouched white, broken only by the dark silhouette of an ancient oak. Its roots twisted like veins, pulsing with the earth's hidden life. Ilara collapsed against it, the bark rough against her back, and tore at the chains with nails that lengthened into claws. The silver yielded with a hiss, drawing beads of her immortal blood, dark and viscous, steaming faintly in the chill. She pressed a hand to the sigil on her wrist. It flickered erratically now, the illusion fraying like mist at dawn. Pain lanced through her, not physical, but the sting of exposure. She had played the part too well, the tender glances across the throne room, the nights when she traced the scars on his broad chest, whispering feigned devotion as she memorized the cadence of his heart. Thorn, with his eyes like forged steel and a melancholy that shadowed his every command, had been her greatest conquest. Or so she thought. A low growl rumbled through the trees, freezing the air in her lungs. Ilara's senses sharpened, the night unfolding in layers of scent and sound. Pine sap mingled with the metallic tang of blood, the crunch of paws on snow approaching from the east. Not wolves, something heavier, more deliberate. Her vampire instincts screamed flight, but curiosity, that fatal flaw, rooted her. She slipped behind the oak, her cloak, a tattered remnant of the king's own, stolen in her haste, blending with the shadows. From the tree line emerged a figure, staggering like a wounded god. It was Thorn himself, the Alpha King, his fur-lined mantle torn and bloodied, a gash across his shoulder, weeping red into the snow. No entourage flanked him. He moved alone, his breath ragged, golden eyes scanning the darkness with a predator's wariness. The wind whipped his dark hair, streaked with frost, and in his fist he clutched a pendant, a silver medallion etched with the lunar crest of his line, swinging like a pendulum of judgment. It caught the moonlight, casting prismatic shards across his face, illuminating the faint scar that bisected his brow, a mark from battles long past. He paused, nostrils flaring, and Ilara's heart, such as it was, stuttered. Had he come to finish her? To drag her back for public execution, her deceptions laid bare before the pack? But there was no rage in his posture, only a weary grace, as if the weight of his crown had finally crushed something vital within. He murmured to the night, voice a gravelly timbre that once sent shivers through her feigned adoration. "I know you're here, little shadow. The moon doesn't lie to those who listen." Ilara's pulse thrummed, a rare betrayal of her undead calm. He knew. All this time he had known, and let her dance in his web. The medallion gleamed in his hand, its chain dangling like a noose, and she wondered if it held the truth of her unraveling, a symbol of the bond she had forged in falsehood, now turned against her. The wind howled louder, carrying the echo of youths from the distant peaks, and in that moment, under the blood moon's watchful eye, exile twisted into something far more perilous: confrontation. She stepped from the shadows, her eyes meeting his, the air between them thick with unspoken accusations, and the faint, inexplicable pull of what might have been fate, if only lies could bleed into truth. The snow whispered secrets as Ilara emerged from the oak's embrace, her silhouette cutting through the moon's silver veil like a blade unsheathed. Thorn's golden eyes locked onto hers, unyielding as the winter stars, and for a heartbeat the forest held its breath. The medallion in his grip swung gently, its lunar crest pulsing with an inner light that mirrored the fading sigil on her wrist, a cruel echo of the bond she had fabricated. Blood from his shoulder wound, dripped steadily, staining the pristine white at his feet, each drop an accusation blooming like ink in water. "You," he said, his voice a low rumble that stirred the air between them, carrying the scent of pine and iron. Not rage, not triumph, but a quiet certainty that chilled her more than the frost. He did not lunge or summon his wolf. Instead, he straightened, wincing as the gash pulled taut, revealing the raw edges of muscle beneath his torn mantle. 5 years of shared silences, of her fingers tracing the map of his scars in the dim glow of hearth fires, flooded back to her now, twisted by revelation. He had known. Every whispered report to the shadows, every night she slipped from his bed to relay pack vulnerabilities to her vampire kin. The weight of it pressed on her chest, heavier than the chains she had shed. Ilara's fangs ached with the urge to bear them, her instincts warring between flight and the inexplicable draw of his gaze. Fear coiled in her gut. Sharp as the wind slicing through the pines, yet curiosity bloomed alongside it, a treacherous warmth against her undead chill. Why pursue her into this forsaken wood? Why reveal himself now, wounded and alone, when the pack's howls echoed from the distant ridges like a call to judgment? She stepped closer, the snow crunching under her boots, her cloak, his cloak, trailing behind her like a surrendered flag. "If you've come to end this charade," she murmured, her voice steady despite the tremor in her core, "do it swiftly. The moon watches, and I tire of games." Thorn's lips curved in a smile that held no mirth, only the ghost of melancholy that had always shadowed his throne. He extended the medallion toward her, the chain glinting like frost-kissed veins. Games? This was never a game, Ilara, or should I say, Lyrian of the Eternal Veil. Her true name on his tongue was a wound, deeper than silver, drawing a hiss from her lips. He had unraveled her completely, thread by thread, while she danced in ignorance. The sigil on her wrist flickered again, sending a jolt of phantom pain up her arm, as if the false mate bond rebelled against the truth. But he did not strike. Instead, he closed the distance, his breath mingling with hers in the frozen air, warm, alive, laced with the copper tang of his blood. Up close, the gash wept freely, the metallic scent intoxicating to her senses, stirring a hunger she ruthlessly suppressed. His eyes searched hers, not with hatred, but a probing intensity that peeled back her layers. "I let you stay," he confessed, voice softening like embers under ash. "Not out of blindness, but choice, your deceptions. They were a mirror to my own failures. The pack fractures from within, traitors in the council whispering to your lords. I needed to see how far the shadows reached." Elara recoiled. The words a slap colder than the wind. Choice? He had used her as bait, a pawn in his web of intrigue, while she plotted his downfall. Instinct urged her to flee, to vanish into the night where vampires thrived on solitude and spite. Yet curiosity rooted her, a spark igniting in the void of her chest. In his gaze, she glimpsed not the tyrant she had spied upon, but a king burdened by guilt, the weight of lost battles, betrayed oaths, the ghosts of Omegas he could not save. The medallion dangled between them, its light caressing her skin, and for a fleeting moment she felt an pull, instinctive and unwelcome, like the tide drawn to the moon. Denied, of course, she was no fated mate, only a thief in the night. A distant howl shattered the tension, closer now, multiplied into a chorus that vibrated through the trees. Thorn's head snapped toward the sound, his body tensing like a bowstring. "They're coming," he growled, the predator surfacing in his stance. "Not my enforcers, your kind, the Vale's hunters, scenting blood." Elara's senses confirmed it. The acrid bite of undeath on the wind, footsteps silent but deliberate, closing from the east. Her lords had discovered her failure, or perhaps Thorn's exile was a ruse to draw them out. Fear twisted with something sharper. Regret? No, survival's edge. Without thinking, she grabbed his arm, her fingers brushing the warmth of his wound, eliciting a sharp intake from him. "Then run, King, or fight alone." But he did not pull away. Instead, his free hand closed over hers, the medallion pressing into her palm, its metal warming against her skin like a promise unspoken. "Not alone," he said, the words hanging heavy, born of necessity more than trust. The connection sparked, instinctive, a shared rhythm of breaths in the storm, fear weaving with curiosity into something perilously like alliance. They bolted into the denser woods, Thorn's longer strides forcing her to match his pace, the snow yielding underfoot like reluctant confessions. Branches whipped at their faces, drawing thin lines of blood that mingled in the air, his vital red, hers darker, eternal. The howls pursued, a symphony of vengeance, but the forest offered fleeting sanctuary, a narrow ravine ahead, shadowed by overhanging cliffs where moonlight barely pierced. Elara's mind raced, rationalizing the madness, protect him to buy time, to unravel his secrets further. Yet as they plunged into the crevice, his body shielding hers from a low branch, the denial cracked. In the press of flight, empathy flickered, a fragile flame against the encroaching dark. They collapsed against the ravine's icy wall, breaths ragged, the medallion clutched between them like a talisman. The hunter's cries echoed above, searching, but for now, the stone muffled their pursuit. Thorn's eyes met hers again, the guilt in them mirroring her own unraveling shame. The wind howled through the gap, carrying flakes that dusted their forms, and in that fragile refuge, the first threads of a bond, not fated, but forged in peril, began to weave. And now I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. The ravine's shadows clung to them like forgotten oaths, the icy walls rising in jagged silence to swallow the moon's probing light. Elara pressed against the stone, her back to the unyielding cold, while Thorn's bulk shielded her from the wind's relentless bite. His blood scented the air, rich, pulsing, a siren's call to her restrained hunger. But she focused on the rhythm of his breath, steady despite the wound that darkened his mantle. The medallion rested warm in her palm, its lunar crest a faint glow against her skin, as if the Dusa herself whispered of fragile truces forged in desperation. Above, the hunters' whispers slithered through the night, their voices a sibilant hiss like serpents uncoiling in the frost. Ilara's kin, the Eternal Veil's elite, moved with predatory grace, their footsteps mere ghosts on the snow. She knew their methods, the slow encirclement, the patience of the undead, waiting for prey to betray itself with a single errant sound. Thorn's golden eyes flicked upward, tracking the faint silhouettes against the starry void, his body coiled like a wolf sensing the pack's betrayal. "How many?" he murmured, his voice a gravel thread in the hush, close enough that his warmth seeped through her cloak, chasing the eternal chill from her bones. 5, perhaps 6, she replied, her words measured, tasting the irony of alliance with the man she had sworn to undermine. Her senses, honed by centuries in the crypts, painted the scene. The lead hunter, Vesper, her former mentor, with his cloak of raven feathers and eyes like polished obsidian. The others, shadows she had once called brethren, now executioners for her perceived failure. They sought her blood not for betrayal alone, but for the secrets she carried, Thorn's vulnerabilities, the pack's fractured loyalties, that could tip the war's scales toward the vampire's eternal night. Fear gnawed at her edges, not for her immortality's sake, but for the unraveling of the life she had built in deception. 5 years of feigned tenderness, of lying in his arms under the guise of fate, now reduced to this, cowering in a crevice with the very king she had spied upon. Thorn shifted, his hand brushing hers as he adjusted the medallion's chain around her wrist, a makeshift binding that hummed with latent power. "They hunt us both now," he said, the confession laced with a melancholy that mirrored the wind's mournful sigh. "My beta's whispers reached your lords, word of a pretender in the king's bed. But I suspect more, a rival alpha from the Ironclaw borders, feeding lies to fracture us all." His gaze held hers, probing the sapphire depths of her deceit, and in that stare, Ilara glimpsed the wound he carried deeper than flesh, the guilt of a ruler who had let shadows linger, hoping to root out rot without staining his hands further. Empathy stirred unbidden, a warmth uncoiling in her chest like the first thaw after endless winter. He was no monster, this Alpha King, merely a man etched by duty's blade, his ethical core battered by the very choices that preserved his throne. A pebble skittered down the ravine wall, dislodged by a hunter's careless step, and the air thickened with peril. Thorn's claws extended instinctively, lengthening into obsidian curves, but he did not rise. Instead, he leaned closer, his breath feathering her ear. "We fight together, or we fall divided. Your choice, Lyrian." The use of her true name again was a tether, pulling her from isolation's edge. She could flee, slip into the shadows where vampires reigned, leaving him to the wolves of his own making. But the medallion pulsed against her skin, its light weaving through her veins like liquid silver, stirring a connection she had long denied, instinctive, raw, born not of sorcery, but the shared pulse of survival. Curiosity had drawn her from hiding. Now, necessity forged something deeper, a bond glimpsed in the flicker of his eyes, where guilt met her own shadowed shame. The first hunter dropped into the ravine, a lithe form landing with feline silence, his fangs bared in the moonlight's gleam. Vesper followed, his presence a chill fog that seeped into the stone. "Traitor," he snarled, eyes locking on Ilara, the word dripping venom colder than the snow. "You bedded the Wolf King, spilled our plans for his scraps of affection. The veil reclaims its due." His kin fanned out, blocking the ravine's mouth, their pale faces masks of eternal hunger, claws glinting like frost blades. Ilara rose, Thorn at her side, their shoulders brushing in unspoken solidarity. The wind howled through the gap, carrying ewives from the distant peaks, perhaps Thorn's pack, or merely the night's lament. She bared her fangs, the ache of hunger sharpening her resolve. But it was Thorn who struck first, lunging with a roar that shook the cliffs. His form blurred into partial shift, muscles rippling under fur-tipped skin as he met the nearest hunter mid-leap. Claws raked flesh, drawing immortal blood that sizzled on the snow, black as midnight oil. Alara joined the fray, her movements a deadly dance, swift, precise, honed by crypt-born shadows. She slashed at Vesper's flank, her nails carving runes of defiance, while Thorn guarded her blind side, his wound forgotten in the heat of battle. Blood sprayed in arcs, mingling red and black upon the white canvas, the metallic tang thick as the ravine's confines amplified every grunt and clash. A hunter's claw grazed Alara's arm, tearing her cloak, Thorn's cloak, but he was there, slamming the assailant against the wall with bone-crunching force. Pain lanced through her, a reminder of her limits. Yet in his protective stance, empathy bloomed into something visceral. Trust, fragile as the medallion's glow, weaving their fates. She glimpsed it in the ferocity of his defense, not for a pretender, but for the woman who had, in lies, touched the solitude of his throne. Vesper circled, opportunistic, his eyes narrowing on the medallion now swinging from Ilara's wrist. "That trinket won't save you!" he hissed, lunging low. But Thorn intercepted, his fist connecting with the vampire's jaw in a crack of impact, sending him sprawling into the snow. The remaining hunters faltered, the tide turning as the two fought as one, Ilara's speed complementing Thorn's raw power, their breaths sinking in the chaos. One by one, the Vale's shadows fell, retreating into the night with wounded cries, leaving the ravine a tableau of crimson-streaked ice. Panting, they slumped against the wall once more, the silence ringing after the storm. Thorn's hand found hers, the medallion bridging their palms, its warmth a quiet affirmation. Ilara met his gaze, the pull undeniable now, fear transmuted to bond, curiosity to a tentative light in her undead heart. The moon watched from above, her light filtering through the cliffs like a benediction, and in that refuge, born of blood and shared peril, the first true thread of connection stirred. Not fated, but chosen, a redemption glimpsed in the other's weary eyes. Yet as the distant howls faded, a deeper shadow loomed, the revelations yet to come, where deceptions would demand their toll. The ravine's hush settled like a shroud after the battle, the snow now a marred canvas of crimson and obsidian, steaming faintly where immortal blood met the chill. Ilara leaned against the jagged stone, her chest heaving not from exertion, but from the raw pulse of survival's echo, her fingers still entwined with thorns around the medallion. Its lunar crest throbbed against her palm, a heartbeat not her own, sinking with the distant thrum of his veins, warm, defiant, alive. The wind whispered through the cliffs, carrying the faint, acrid residue of her kin's retreat. But the night felt heavier now, pregnant with unspoken truths that clawed at the edges of her composure. Thorn's golden eyes, shadowed by frost-laced lashes, held hers in the dim glow filtering from above. His wound had slowed the seep of blood, the gash across his shoulder knitting with the slow resilience of alpha blood, yet pain etched lines into his face, deepening the melancholy that had always lingered there like a perpetual eclipse. He released her hand slowly, the medallion's chain slipping free, but its warmth lingered on her skin, a phantom tether. "You fought like one born to the pack," he said, his voice a gravel murmur laced with wonder, not accusation. "Not the pretender I allowed into my halls, but something more. Why hide it, Lyrian? From them? From me?" She recoiled inwardly, the use of her true name a blade twisting in the void where her heart should beat. 5 years of shadows, of crafting illusions to mask her vampire essence, the subtle glamour that softened her fangs into smiles, her pallor into moon-kissed grace, had shielded her from more than just his suspicions. There was a gift buried deeper, one even the eternal veil had feared, a remnant of her turning under a blood moon long ago, the sight, a fractured oracle's vision that pierced veils of fate, revealing paths not taken, destinies entwined like roots beneath the snow. It had lain dormant, suppressed by her lord's rituals, lest it turn her from spy to seer, a liability in their endless wars. But now, in this crevice forged of peril, it stirred, unbidden, as the medallion's light danced across her wrist where the false sigil had faded. Ilara's vision blurred, the ravine's walls dissolving into swirling mists of silver and shadow. The air thickened with the scent of ancient pine and smoldering embers, though no fire burned nearby. Whispers coiled around her, not the wind's howl, but voices from the ether, weaves of spectral wolves, the Deuce's lament echoing through lunar veins. She gasped, clutching the medallion as images flooded her. Thorn's throne room awash in blood, not from battle but betrayal. His beta enforcer, Elias, the one who had cast her out, clutching a dagger etched with iron claw runes, plunging it into the king's back under a shattered moon. Beyond that, a greater unraveling. The Silverfang pack splintering, vampires pouring from the veil like night itself, claiming the northern holds in an eternal winter of undeath. But threaded through the carnage, a single path gleamed, her hand in thorns, the medallion blazing as a beacon, guiding him through the storm to a revelation. Not conquest, but alliance, forged in the fire of shared wounds. The vision shattered as abruptly as it came, leaving her knees buckling, the cold stone biting into her palms. Thorn caught her, his arms encircling her waist with a strength tempered by gentleness, pulling her against the solid wall of his chest. His heartbeat thundered against her ear, a rhythm that drowned the lingering echoes, grounding her in the visceral now, the heat of his skin through torn fabric, the faint musk of wolf and blood mingling with her own shadowed essence. "What did you see?" he demanded softly, his breath stirring the hair at her temple, carrying the warmth of embers against her eternal chill. There was no command in his tone, only the quiet urgency of a king who had long carried solitude's burden, now glimpsing a crack in his isolation. Tears, impossible, unbidden, pricked her eyes, born not of sorrow, but the overwhelming clarity of the sight's gift. She lifted her gaze to his, sapphire meeting gold, and for the first time, the denial fractured completely. "Betrayal," she whispered, her voice trembling like wind through bare branches. "Elias, your beta. He's the traitor, whispering to the Ironclaw Alpha and my lords. The pack falls unless—" She trailed off, the medallion pulsing brighter in her grasp, its light casting ethereal patterns on the snow-dusted ground, illuminating the path she had glimpsed. Unless she became the key, the pathfinder, as the old lunar lore named such seers, one who navigated destiny's labyrinth, turning rejection into redemption. Her vampire blood, once a curse of eternal night, now hummed with purpose, the sight manifesting as a bridge between worlds. Wolf and shadow, king and spy. Thorn's expression shifted, the melancholy yielding to a dawning realization that etched awe across his features. He traced the medallion's chain along her wrist, his touch reverent, as if handling a sacred relic unearthed from forgotten crypts. "The Deuce's mark," he breathed, his eyes widening with the weight of prophecy fulfilled. "All this time, I sensed it, the pull beyond your lies, a thread in the moon's weave. You are no pretender, Lyrian. You are the one foretold, the shadow who lights the way through winter's heart." Guilt flickered in his gaze, not for her deceptions, but his own. The choice to let her linger, testing her while ignoring the oracle's whisper in his dreams. The medallion warmed further, its lunar crest aligning with a faint scar on her collarbone, hidden until now, a birthmark from her mortal days mirroring his line's sigil. Destiny, not sorcery, had drawn her to his side. She was the key to his survival, the redemption he sought in the ruins of his fractured realm. Ilara's mind reeled, the revelation a double-edged blade, freedom in truth, yet chains in fate's demand. The wind howled anew, stirring the bloodied snow into flurries that danced like spectral witnesses, and in Thorn's embrace, the instinctive connection deepened into something profound, a bond of seer and sovereign, where her hidden gift illuminated the path from exile to alliance. But shadows lingered. The vision warned of trials yet to come, where choice would test the fragile light blooming between them. As the moon climbed higher, casting her silver judgment over the ravine, Thorn pressed his forehead to hers, their breaths mingling in the frozen air. A silent vow amid the encroaching dawn of destiny's call. Comment Luna if you'd walk through the storm for someone who saw your worth. The ravine's silvered hush gave way to the relentless march of dawn's first blush, painting the cliffs in hues of pale rose and steel. Ilara pulled back from Thorn's forehead, the warmth of his skin lingering like a brand on her undead flesh, the medallion heavy against her chest where he had draped its chain. Its lunar crest pulsed faintly now, a heartbeat echoing her fractured visions, binding her gift to the weight of what lay ahead. The sight had unveiled her role, the pathfinder, navigator of shadowed fates, but it offered no mercy, only the stark crossroads of truths that demanded confrontation. Her sapphire eyes met his golden ones, the air between them thick with the scent of bloodied snow and unspoken reckonings. Guilt coiled in her core, not for the deceptions of 5 years, but for the lives her spying had imperiled, the pack's fractures she had widened in ignorance of her true purpose. Thorn rose first, his movements deliberate despite the wound's pull, extending a hand scarred from battles past. "We return to the stronghold," he said, voice a low timbre resonant with the earth's deep rumble. "Elias must face the pack's judgment before the Iron Claw strikes." There was no command in his tone, only the ethical resolve of a king who bore duty like a crown of thorns, his melancholy etched deeper by the betrayal the sight had revealed. Ilara hesitated, her fingers brushing his palm, the contact sending a shiver through her, a visceral reminder of the bond forging between them. Instinctive yet resisted, rationalized as survival's illusion. Freedom whispered from the shadows, the eternal veil's endless night where she could vanish, unburdened by wolf politics or prophetic chains. Yet the medallion warmed against her skin, urging her forward, and in his gaze she saw the mirror of her own shame, a chance for redemption, fragile as frost under the rising sun. They emerged from the ravine as the forest stirred, pines groaning under fresh snowfalls that muffled their steps. The journey back wound through the whispering woods, the wind carrying distant ewives, warnings from the pack's borders, or perhaps the Iron Claw's encroaching howl. Thorn's stride was steady, his mantle torn, but his posture unbowed. The Alpha's essence radiating like hearth fire against the encroaching cold. Ilara matched him, her cloak, his cloak, trailing like a banner of tentative alliance, the medallion hidden beneath her collar, its weight a secret talisman. Introspection clawed at her as they moved. What was strength, if not choosing to face the storm one had summoned? The sight flickered at the edges of her mind. Glimpses of Elias's smug face in the throne room, dagger concealed, while vampire envoys lurked in the undercroft, their pale hands sealing pacts with the rival Alpha. Love, or what bloomed in its shadow, was no reward here. Only a trial, demanding she weigh compassion against the liberty of eternal solitude. The stronghold loomed as midday crested, its ice-veined walls rising like the spine of ancient mountains, torches flickering in iron braziers that cast golden reflections on armored sentries. The pack's howls greeted their return, a chorus of confusion and loyalty swelling as Thorn led her through the gates. Whispers rippled like wind through dry leaves. The pretender returned, bloodied and unbound, at the king's side. Elias awaited in the great hall, his broad frame flanked by enforcers, eyes narrowing to slits of feigned surprise as they entered. The hall was a cavern of stone and shadow, the throne a massive seat of carved oak and silver, bathed in the light slanting through high slits like lunar beams trapped in daylight. The air hummed with tension, the scent of fir and forge smoke mingling with the faint, underlying rot of deceit. "Thorn," Elias boomed, stepping forward with a beta's deference masking calculation, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. The pretender was cast out as law demands. Why bring her back to taint these halls? His gaze slid to Alara, venomous, the iron claw tattoo hidden beneath his cuff, a sigil she now recognized from her visions, pulsing with forbidden allegiance. The pack murmured, wolves in human form shifting uneasily, their eyes gleaming with the wild hunger of those torn between king and rumor. Thorn ascended the dais, his hand gesturing Alara to his side, a silent affirmation that drew gasps from the assembly. "Because truth demands it," he replied, his tone measured, laced with the melancholy of a ruler who had long suspected the serpent in his fold. "Alara, Lyrian of no veil but destinies, has seen what shadows hide. Speak, Pathfinder. Let the moon's light burn away the lies." Alara stepped forward, the medallion slipping free to gleam against her throat, its light amplifying as if drawing power from the hall's latent lunar wards. The pack's breaths stilled, the air thickening with anticipation, the fire in the central hearth crackling like a heartbeat. She met Elias's glare, her voice steady, poetic in its tragedy. "The beta you trust whispers to the Ironclaw's throne and the eternal veil's crypts. He sells your borders for power's promise, his dagger poised under the blood moon. I saw it, the pack's fall, blood on snow. Unless mercy claims the traitor before war does." The words hung, visceral, painting the hall in imagined carnage. Rivers of red, carving through white fields, weaves silenced by vampire fangs, Thorn's throne empty amid the ruins. Chaos erupted. Enforcers lunged, but Thorn's roar halted them, a primal command that vibrated through bone and stone. Elias snarled, shifting partially, claws extending as he circled the dais. "Lies from a spy's tongue. She poisoned you, Brother King, with her venomous wiles." The rival's shadow loomed in Alara's periphery, a messenger from Ironclaw slipping through a side door, dagger drawn, the air electric with betrayal's spark. The pack divided, loyalties fracturing like ice under pressure, howls rising in a cacophony of doubt and fury. Alara's heart, such as it was, pounded with the moral tempest. Forgive the traitor, weaving redemption's thread, or unleash war's blade, claiming liberty and vengeance. Thorn's eyes sought hers amid the fray, guilt and resolve mingling in their gold depths, his hand brushing the medallion in silent question. She could walk away, let the wolves devour their own, preserving her shadowed freedom. But compassion stirred, born of the bond they had forged, the king's ethical wound calling to her own, promising not ease, but rebirth through choice. As Elias lunged, blade flashing, Alara moved, her sight guiding her strike, a precise slash that disarmed him, pinning him before the throne. Blood welled from his wrist, staining the stone, the medallion blazing as witness. The hall fell silent, breaths ragged, the fire's glow dancing on faces etched with awe and dread. Thorn knelt beside the fallen beta, his voice a whisper of tragic mercy. "Why, Elias? For what crown built on our bones?" The traitor's eyes flickered with defeat, confession spilling like dark wine. Pacts with Ironclaw for a share of the north, vampire gold sealing the doom. The pack closed in, but Thorn raised a hand, choosing forgiveness's edge. Exile over death, a moral gauntlet that spared blood while demanding atonement. Alara watched, the weight of her choice settling like snow. Not love's reward, but its proof, binding her to this world of fur and fire. Yet as the Ironclaw messenger fled into the storm, war's shadow lingered, a spiritual dilemma unresolved. Pardon the past, or arm for the gathering dark. The medallion cooled against her skin, a symbol of paths diverging, and in Thorn's grateful gaze she glimpsed the cost of compassion, chains of destiny, heavier than any exile's freedom. The wind outside howled like a judgment deferred, carrying the promise of trials yet to break or bind them under the moon's unyielding watch. The great hall's fires guttered like dying stars, casting elongated shadows that danced across the stone floor, where Elias's blood pooled in dark rivulets, steaming faintly against the chill seeping from the walls. Ilara stood motionless on the dais, the medallion's chain a cool weight against her collarbone, its lunar crest dimmed now, as if sated by the revelations it had summoned. The pack encircled them in a tense semicircle, their breaths a collective hush, eyes gleaming with the feral uncertainty of wolves torn between loyalty and the scent of fresh betrayal. Thorn knelt before the fallen Beta, his broad shoulders bowed under the invisible yoke of kingship, the melancholy in his golden gaze deepened by the raw edge of Mercy's blade. The wind clawed at the stronghold's eaves, howling through cracks like the Deuce's mournful dirge, carrying flakes of snow that swirled inward, dusting the air with crystalline witnesses to this pivotal fracture. Ilara's undead heart, stilled for centuries, stirred with a phantom ache, the site's echoes lingering like frostbite in her veins. She had chosen intervention, disarming Elias not with vengeance but precision, her visions guiding the strike that spared the hall a slaughter. Yet freedom's whisper taunted her still, a shadow path where she could slip into the eternal night, unburdened by this world of pulsing blood and ethical thorns. The medallion warmed against her skin, a subtle pulse urging otherwise, threading her fate to Thorn's wounded resolve. What was redemption, if not the surrender of solitude for the fire of shared scars? Her sapphire eyes traced the lines of his face, etched by guilt's relentless chisel, the king who had known her lies yet chosen vulnerability, letting her deceptions mirror his own hidden fractures. Love in this lunar weave was no gentle bloom but a trial forged in blood and choice, demanding she heal the wound she had helped inflict. Elias lifted his head, chains of silver-wrought iron now binding his wrists, courtesy of the enforcers who had subdued him without a fight. His eyes, once sharp with ambition, dulled to the gray of defeat, reflecting the hearth's flickering light like tarnished steel. "Mercy won't save you, Thorn," he rasped, voice thick with the copper tang of his wound, blood trickling from his lip where Ilara's claw had grazed. The iron claw marches with veiled shadows at their flanks. Your pack crumbles. Your pretenders' visions are but fever dreams. The words hung, a venomous seed sown in doubt, and murmurs rippled through the assembly, howls of discord rising like smoke from the central blaze. The rival Alpha's envoy had vanished into the storm, but his threat echoed. Armies massing beyond the whispering woods, vampire sorcery blending with wolf ferocity to claim the northern throne in an unending eclipse. Thorn rose slowly, his hand finding Ilara's in a grip that transmitted the heat of his resolve, calluses rough against her smooth pallor, a tactile bridge between worlds. "Dreams or destiny, we face it unbound by your treachery," he declared, his timbre resonating through the hall like thunder rolling over snow-capped peaks. The pack stilled, drawn to the ethical core in his voice, the melancholy king transformed by the choice of compassion over conquest. He turned to Ilara, his gaze a forge of gold and shadow, probing the depths where her gift had awakened. "Pathfinder?" he murmured, the title a sacred invocation. "The Deusa has marked you as my anchor. Will you stand with us, not as spy, but as the light that pierces our winter?" The question pierced her, sharper than fangs, stirring the spiritual tempest within. Sacrifice beckoned, to bind her sight to the pack's defense, revealing paths through the encroaching war, healing the fractures her deceptions had widened. Or union. Not as fated mates in sorcery's lie, but in the raw rebirth of trust, where her eternal chill met his vital warmth. Rationalization clawed at her. Eternal night offered liberty, unscarred by wolf oaths or the pain of mortal bonds. But the medallion blazed anew, its light spilling across Thorn's chest, illuminating the faint scars she had once traced in feigned tenderness. Those nights flooded back. His confessions whispered in the hearth's glow, the guilt of lost omegas haunting his dreams, now laid bare as the mirror to her own shadowed turning. Empathy, born in the ravine's refuge, had woven into something profound. A bond resisted no longer, accepted as the Deusa's revelation. The hall trembled as distant war drums pulsed through the stone. The iron claw's advance, heralded by the wind's furious gale, carrying the acrid bite of vampire mist on its breath. Enforcers shifted to the doors, claws extending, but Thorn held the pack's focus, his free hand raising the medallion from Alara's throat, its chain glinting like veins of moonlight. "Witness," he commanded, voice steady amid the rising storm, "the bond that redeems us all." He pressed the crest to her wrist, where the false sigil had faded, and a surge ignited. Her sight blooming fully, visions cascading like auroras, paths of alliance where wolf and shadow united against greater darkness. Thorn's throne reclaimed not by blood alone, but by the mercy she embodied. A union sealed in choice, healing his guilt as she shed her exile's veil. Ilara gasped. The influx visceral, sensations of wind-lashed snow, the roar of flames in besieged holds, the metallic kiss of blood under a blood moon. But at the core, Thorn's presence anchored her, his heartbeat syncing with the medallion's pulse, a rhythmic vow that thawed her eternal frost. She nodded, tears, miraculous, warm, tracing her cheeks, born of rebirth's ache. "I choose you," she whispered, voice poetic in its tragedy. "Not for crowns or fates imposed, but to mend what shadows broke. Let this be our healing, union in the storm." The pack erupted in unified howls, loyalty reignited as Thorn pulled her close, his lips brushing her forehead in a seal of quiet ferocity. The medallion glowed between them, a symbol of renascimento, rejection transmuted to destiny. Her hidden gift the key that unlocked his wounded heart. Yet as the first Ironclaw scouts breached the outer wards, their cries shattering the night, the final choice loomed. Not ended, but evolved. Sacrifice would demand her visions in battle's fray, healing the pack's wounds while war tested their bond's fragile flame. Under the moon's ascent, blood and fire awaited, but in Thorn's embrace, Ilara glimpsed true strength, compassion's crown, worn through love's unyielding proof. The wind outside crescendoed to a spiritual symphony, weaves blending with the Deusa's call, as King and Pathfinder stepped into the fray together, reborn, unbowed, their union a beacon against the gathering dark. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe. Because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.